In this video, I'm going to go over how to create sketches, and we are going to create 4 simple sketches using dimensional constraints. And so we'll talk about how to do that as we go. So the first sketch we're going to do is going to be a square. And in order to do that, first of all, a sketch, this is where you create one. And this is how you start everything in Onshape, and I mean everything. Even as you go to modify parts, you're creating sketches to, modify an existing object, but you also use them to create things for, to create data for you to create stuff. You can even see here it says a sketch is the basis for all parts. Select a plane, planar face, or make connector on which to create a new sketch. We're going to click create a sketch, and then it's going to say select your sketch plane. For this first assignment, I really don't care what you use. If you want to just do what I do to make your life a little easier and you can follow along with the video, I'm going to click on the front plane. When you click on a plane, it highlights it with like an additional blue rectangle, and it even labels sketch 1. Over here, a window pops up, indicating to you that you are in an editing sketch window. Also, if you noticed, our toolbar tools up here changed. Okay, so we don't have like the other tool ribbon. Now we have our sketching tool ribbon. This is important to understand because sometimes you guys are looking for those other tools, but you're in a sketch, and so they're not in there. So you need to get out of the editing sketch phase. And so, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But anyways, we're gonna continue on our way. We are in sketch 1. You can also relabel this. I really highly encourage you guys to do that. You can label your sketch 1 as square because we're gonna make a square. Okay. And then over here under your features, you'll quickly be able to find what sketch you made that was a square. And right now it's the only one we have. However, as we start creating more stuff, you're gonna have more things. So if it's labeled, it's gonna live for a long time. It's also just great practice to do. Since we're sketching on the front plane, I'm gonna isolate that plane. And so I just hit the front face of our view cube over here because a sketch is a 2D surface basically that you're creating. So we're going to isolate that 2D plane that we're operating on. So up here, you can probably figure out how to make a square, if you mess around with it enough. We have line, rectangle tools, circles, arcs. We're going to get into using all this stuff. We can make a square using the line tool. So for example, we can click the line and start dragging it up. On your assignment, you'll see you make a 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch square. Or I guess a 1 by 1 inch square. And so you can try your very best to get it to 1 inch. However, I'm going to show you, we're going to use dimensional constraints, which will, help us do that. So just click as close as you can to 1 inch. And then you can go this way, click as close as you can to 1 inch. You'll notice here that Onshape actually snaps you. It assumes that you're kind of wanting to make a square, and then it helps you do so. Okay, but you can see here it's not exactly 1 inch. You might think to yourself, okay, no big deal, whatever. But when you guys start making stuff and actually printing it out and creating mechanical devices, your dimensions are going to matter, even the smallest tolerances. So it's good for you to know how to make things exact. To make these exact, we're going to use something called the dimension tool. Right here, you can also type D and it'll launch you into it and it'll highlight it. You can also click on it. When you click on it, you can click on edges, okay? And you can click on them, drag it out, click, then you can type in your dimension that you want that edge to be, and it'll automatically snap it. Okay, the dimension tool is still highlighted. You can always click on an edge, or in some cases, you might want to click on 2 points. And you go ahead and place that. and do 1 inch as well. My units are set to inches, so when I click 1, it's going to automatically be in inches. If you didn't initially do that when you set up your Onshape, you can always change that. You can also like say I wanted this to be like 1 millimeter instead. You can type that unit in and it'll do that. But I want it to be 1 inch. This is just saying like, hey, you're looking straight. I need both of this, so and there's our 1 inch by 1 inch square. Woohoo! So we're gonna hit check on our square, and then I'm gonna click out here, and then you'll see now we have a face. We have our square. Beautiful. Okay. And then later on, we'll turn that into a cube. However, for this first portion of your assignment, we are just focusing on sketching. So we're going to create another sketch. We're going to create a rectangle. So we're going to go back to create another sketch. It's going to launch us in, it's going to call it sketch 1. We can change this, rename it to be rectangle, and then we can start sketching. It does have me, I need to select a sketch plane. You can click on the front again. I'll toggle over to the front, and I'm just going to draw this rectangle over here. Your assignment indicates that it needs to be a 1.5 inch by 3 inch rectangle. If you notice here, there is a rectangle tool. So let's go ahead and click on that and use it. I'm going to kind of line this up with the origin, but I'm going to draw it off to the side. So I'm going to click and place it. And then again, you guys can like, look, and it's like, well, it needs to be 3 by 1.5, and I can get it as close as I can. But remember, we have that dimension tool. So go ahead and just click your rectangle at approximately, those dimensions, and then go in and use your dimension tool to snap it to that 3 inches by 1.5 inches. Okay. And then boom, we've got our rectangle. Let's close it out. And about, you have both. And over here you have your square and your rectangle. Wonderful. The third shape and sketch we're going to create is going to be a circle. All right. I know this is super complex. We're going to create a sketch, and we're going to click on the front again, toggle to the front. Again, I like to isolate the plane because things start to get weird and start floating around in places you don't want them to. If you don't, now it doesn't always necessarily be consistent. So center point circle, it's going to be our third option over. We're going to go ahead and click it. We can do center point circle. If you drop this arrow down, you'll see here that there's like a 3-point circle, or you can create an ellipse. But more oftentimes than not, you'll want to create a center point circle. So to do that, we can kind of drag out this origin line and go ahead and create our circle. The diameter here needs to be 1.5 inches. So again, you can get as close as possible and place it, but we can also use that dimension tool on the circle. It's just going to look slightly different because it's a circle, so it's going to have like a theta symbol indicating like you're defining the radius. The diameter rather than like the length of the edge. So our circle needs to be 1.5 inches in diameter. So I'm going to click that, and that's perfect. There we go. And it's okay that it's like down here relative to those. We'll just and then we'll get out of that. And now we've got our rectangle, circle, and our square. I did not label this one, so you can always right click on it, rename it. Circle. Okay. So you can see here, we are starting to like accumulate some sketches. The last sketch I'm going to have you do for this section of your assignment is going to be an equilateral triangle in which each edge is 1 inch long. So I'm going to click on the front face again, create that sketch 1. I'm going to name it triangle, and then I'm going to toggle over to the front face. And you can literally draw it wherever you want. You can go over here, you can go over here. Just because it's starting to come off the front face really doesn't matter. All that thing is just a reference. So you might be asking yourself, how should I draw a triangle? Well, we're not going to use the rectangle tool because that's going to give us 4 edges. You can use the line tool. I'm going to use it for this. Technically, you could use the polygon tool, but I'll go over that in a separate video. So I'm just going to use the line tool. And I'm going to kind of click and start it out here. You might be like, I have no idea how to draw 1-inch equilateral triangle. Like, what even angle do I do that at? Just start clicking, okay? And then we can use that dimension tool. Okay. So right now, I have no idea if those edges are equal, but I'm going to click on my dimension tool and I'm going to set them equal. So I'm going to set that one to 1. That one's already set to 1. It must have defaulted to being equal. And then this one's slightly off, but I'm just going to reset it to 1. And now it's all equal 1 by 1 by 1. My triangle is done. Woohoo! And those are our 4 shapes that we need. So go ahead and screenshot, get your screenshots for your assignment and then continue on to the next video.